Hey guys, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dad. And to keep this truck moving forward, we're going to
make traction bars and get them installed.
So we're sitting where our Ford 8.8 rear end normally sits. I wanted to dive into that transmission right away, but I'm still waiting on parts. So we have to keep this project moving. So what we're going to do is we are going to dive into this rear suspension. Yes, this is going to be a leaf spring truck. It's not back half. You can see there's no secrets, but there's tricks that you can do to ensure good traction and to avoid the wheel hop. And that is with a set of ladder bars or cow tracks. Now, ladder bars are cheap and cow tracks are the nicer system to go to, but they're quite expensive as well. And when you're trying to save a little money, what is our options? Our options is to build our own set of cow tracks. And it's completely doable, and I will show you. A lot of the drag race shocks and custom this and that, they cost a lot of money. And yeah, they're great products and they are for sure the way to go if you have the budget for it. But on this truck, we're going to experiment with just using a normal set of air shocks. Now, I bought these for a 91 S-10, and it's a direct bolt-in at the top. But since we did so much modification on our rear end, we don't have a way to actually mount the bottom of it. So we're going to have to fabricate that and make it. So what we did is on our new plates that hold our U-bolts, we're going to end up creating a stud. So this is a 5/8 bolt, and we just cut the head off of it. So we made a stud, and this is a hardened bolt. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to locate how far in this needs to go and make sure everything's good and clean. And we're going to weld this bolt directly to these bottom plates so we have a perch for our rear shocks. Now, our air shocks are normally made to run together, same PSI in each shock, but we're not going to do that. We're going to plumb these things separately with separate gauges and separate fill ports. That way we can kind of tweak and tune the left side versus the right side the same way you would adjust a coilover. Now, are these as good as the race coilovers? No, they're not. They're not going to be as long lasting either. But for now, to get this truck up and going, I think it's going to work just fine. Now, some of you have probably heard of ladder bars. Some of you probably heard the cow tracks. And if you're seasoned builders or been in this business for a long time with hot rods and custom cars and whatnot, you already know what all this is. But this is for the people that doesn't know what this is all about. And I want to kind of explain it to you and just kind of bring it down into like a beginner level. If you haven't Googled it yet to understand what a cow tracks is, it's basically a rod that pulls pressure from here into a pivoting point that applies pressure to the leaf spring right here. That way, when you do burnouts or go hard launches, you don't get spring wrap. What spring wrap is or wheel hop. What that is whenever you're doing a burnout and the leaf springs can't control themselves and they're vibrating just violently and basically shaking all the fillings out of your teeth. To avoid that, you can use ladder bars or use the cow track system. So you may be wondering, Dad, how are you going to custom build that? Well, we made ourselves a couple templates. And I already have the plate cut out that we're going to use for these. And with these templates, we can have an accurate measurement on both sides. And I'll show you here shortly just where these pieces belong. So our first template that we made was this piece right here. Now, it had an unfortunate scissor accident and was cut in half. Ashley's over there shaking his head. He didn't know what this was for, thought it was just scrap, so he cut it up. But that's okay because we don't need it anymore. But when you look at this template right here, I created the dimensions directly from the cow tracks, and they use nothing but a 5/8 hole at the end of it. Now, this is what our finished product comes at. Now, as I mentioned before, you will need 5/8 heim joint, and you're also going to need this you're going to need 2 in reverse thread, and you're going to need 2 in left-handed thread. So our template are these 2 plates here. Now, those are going to get welded directly on the bottom of the spring hangers. Now, if you're wondering why I have this bolted together, we're actually going to tack this into place just like this. I want to leave this bolted together. It doesn't have to be tight, but enough it's going to keep everything straight. Because when you go starting to tack these and weld these plates are going to want to flex and move out. And this will just help keep it in the position that we're looking for without movement. Now, the next part's where it gets a little bit trickier. This is the pivoting piece that goes on the front side of the spring itself. This is the piece that we have cut out for that. Now, this utilizes a 13/16 hole. Now, that's going to be where the bolt goes through the spring itself. And then we're going to utilize a 5/8 hole for our other heim joint. Well, here. So our other heim joint essentially goes through the plates. Yeah, you got to imagine you got two of these. So they're going to be two side by side. So that heim joint's going to get smashed in between those as well. And so 5/8 bolt at the bottom, and then of course a 5/8 bolt hole at the end. And this is where we'll run a threaded bolt through it. And that's what's going to put tension on the leaf spring. Now that we had our pattern, our plates are cut. So essentially, these are going to be side by side, and these are going to be able to adjust up and down for spring tension. So it's fabrication, but you can save yourself a ton of money. Now, I will admit that I started kind of like building these pieces about 3 years ago, three and a half years ago. And at the time, all the heim joints and the hardware that I needed, I think I only paid about $60. So I'm sure that the prices for that have come up some, but you know, it's still, if you have the fabrication experience, you want to tackle it yourself, it's completely doable. And don't be afraid to get in there and try it. So I got Ash out here helping me tonight, which I always look for any help that I can get. And we're trying to set our distance of how much stud we can mount on our, or weld on our spring plate, because we need to make sure we have enough threads hanging out to where this nylock can get fully seated on there. Now, Ash, why did you put a blue mark right there?
So I know where it can weld.
So we know where we can weld. That's pretty smart, ain't it?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're able to pull this whole plate off, and we're going to go ahead and get this welded up in that position. And we'll do this off camera because once you've seen one, you've seen them both. But we will actually do the same on this side.
First step is we need to take this center bolt out so we can get this plate off. But because when we take that plate off, these are going to start to fall down. So we're going to take a pair of vice grips and we're going to clamp it on there. And then that makes it hold it together so it won't fall.
Keep going. Try to drop it on you. So now that our bolts are clean and our plate's clean, we're going to go ahead and get this thing lined up and get it tacked on by using this identification mark that Ash used with the Sharpie. Now, these spring plates, they are tapered down, and they do that for strength and rigidity. But I don't want to get right in the pocket because I'm afraid that we might have a little bit of a clearance issue when we go put our U-bolts in. So we're going to go just a little bit on the higher side of that slope, kind of tapering up, and that should get us right to where we need to be. Now that our stud's tacked into place, we can go ahead and fully weld it. Now that our shock perch is completely welded, we can go ahead and get our torque plates welded down. So now here, you're going to want to make sure you do your due diligence to making sure that these are lined up, squared, and plumbed correctly. But once they are, go ahead and get those tacked. And then once everything is tacked, you're going to want to leave this together so you can fully weld the inside and the outside without having a lot of deflection on these two plates. And once you have that completed, then you can do the same thing with just a C-clamp on the outside and be able to get on the inside to complete a weld on those as well. All right, that falls directly in the middle of the plate. And now we can proceed with go ahead and fully welding the inside and the outside. Okay, so she is sizzling but fully welded. Not looking too shabby through there. And we are done with this plate. So we're going to go ahead and lay this on the floor and let it cool off a little bit while we grab the other one off. Bring it over here and do the same thing. You ready, Taterhead?
Yeah.
Our spring plates are completed. We're going to let the other one cool off for a little while before we try to install it. But as you can see here, we have the bottom plates for our heim joint. Those are all welded, plus our spring perch stud is all welded and ready to go. It's a perfect fit. And Asher's going to go ahead and just, even though it's just temporary, he's just going to throw a washer and a nut on it, more so just to help us keep up with our hardware.
Oh yeah, let me tell you something. He welded the other one the wrong way, so now we're just.
Okay, now I thought for a second there, bud, we were going to try to keep that to ourselves and not show our mistakes, but we make plenty of them, don't we? Yeah, so what he's talking about is on these spring plates right here where I welded that stud here. Well, I welded both of them on the same direction. So yeah, the stud I welded for the Passenger side is pointing the same way as this one, so we're not gonna. The plastic part goes on the outside, and so yeah, we're gonna let that other one cool off because I'm gonna have to cut the weld back off and flop it to the other side. So we're now getting down to the nitty gritty. Remember the templates that I showed you? I went ahead and punched out those holes where the bolts are going to go, where this thing will pivot. And we went ahead and transferred that to each one of our individual plates. Now there is 4 of these plates total. And if you're wondering, how do I plan to keep all these plates exactly the same in the bolt holes? Well, I don't have a whole lot to work with as far as big vices and drill presses and all that. That stuff's coming. But just an easy way to do this is I went ahead and I smashed all these 4 plates together, got everything lined up and flush around the corners as much as possible, and stuck it in the vise. And I did pilot holes through each one of these holes through all 4 plates at one time. Then you can go back and rip them up a little bit bigger individually with having the same consistency from hole to hole to hole. Now, I got 2 more plates that I need to do, but let me take you over and show you how this thing starts to take some shape. Now, mind you, we're still in mock-up stage, so this is a judge-free zone. But we went ahead and got our spring plates put back on. Remember, these are the lower brackets that we welded on. And we also went ahead and just kind of test mounted our shock perch. That's all doing the thing. This is all doing the thing. But this stays stationary where this side pivots. So now you can kind of get a, sorry for the shaky camera. And yeah, I just have a drill bit holding it right now, but you kind of get the idea. We have our heim joint here. We'll have to make our rod that goes all the way down to that heim joint as well. But once we do that, then this will adjust up and down just the way we need it. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and although I'm sure you could probably get by for a little while using the factory spring bushing that's in here, I probably wouldn't do that. I went ahead and, well, I don't even have them in there yet. I'm going to put them in there, but I have the solid mount, the metal, or it's aluminum one where you burn out the old bushing and you put that one in there. I'm not going to do that on camera because it's incredibly boring. It's smoky trying to, well, you can press it out. Anyway, got to go out with that and go in with the new solid mount. That'll make this real rigid and allow it to rock better. You probably could shave down the sides to get your plates in there on the factory one just to, get the thing up and going. But if you're already there, hey, just go ahead and swap those things out. Well, a few days have went by since we've been able to work on this truck, but in the meantime, we've had some goodies show up. We've had our transmission rebuild kit show up and our heavy-duty sprag gear. Now, since we had a pause waiting on all these transmission parts to show up, we decided to go ahead and dive into this rear end and get the suspension kind of knocked out. So we're going to just continue that even though those parts showed up, but we're going to put that on hold and we're going to get after getting these brackets boxed in. Now, I went ahead on the plasma cutter and I cut me out some plates, one for the top, one for the bottom, but we don't want to fully box it in, and I'm going to show you why. Since we have the main structure of this already completed, you can see I have a smooth shouldered bolt going through this. Now, we are going to have to find a little bit of a sleeve to go around this bolt, so that way when we tighten this down, it pinches on the sleeve and keeps our spacing correct on each side. Now, on the bottom side, you can see, no, I'm not going to leave it this way, but I did use a series of washers just so I could get my distance set between here. And it came out to be right around 3 inches on the money here and up on the top. So with this crank down, we now have our spacings. Now the idea here is we can't fully box this in because we have our whole spring, the end of the spring where the bushing is. Well, you got to be able to remove that from here. But we definitely want to give it as much structure as possible. So with our plate, we're just going to simply take that, go right in here, down close to the bottom of the bolt, and we're going to stitch that in. And of course, on the top of our hanger here, we're going to go ahead and just stitch in just a little piece right here, far enough away from that bolt to where you can still reach your spacer and everything, which we may just fully weld that spacer in. It's what I'm really considering. But I'm just going to lay it down in there for now. But you can see I'm not going to take it all the way to the back, and I'm not going to take it all the way to the end. Just something in the middle, just to kind of give it some support and structure. And that will be plenty for this. Well, that isn't going to work. And I will show you why. All right, so we're going to be okay here plating the top, but this bottom, I really didn't, now who needs a ground lead? I really didn't even take into consideration. Now, this isn't a problem, but I really didn't take into consideration how much of a pitch that this heim joint is going to be to get the rod to meet with the lower spring hanger. And since that's on such a slope, we're going to have a lot of interference with this plate. We'd have to move it so far forward that we would never be able to get this bracket off of the spring. And we definitely don't want that. Now, we also can't really plate the back of it, or it hits the factory, this bracket here that's pretty much riveted onto the original S-10 frame. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to leave this open. Once we get our spacers in here, that'll offer plenty of support on the bottom, and we will have our support on the top. And this actually coincides with a lot of the original Cowtrax design. So, all right, the last stage of our mock-up on this is to get a measurement of what our support bar is going to be, since we're going to make this thing from scratch. Now, basically, all I'm doing right now is these heim joints, I got two nuts on them, and keep in mind, one's left-handed thread, one's right-handed thread. But I ran the first one all the way up to the end, and I ran the second one up to where it follows. So the measurement I'm going to strike on this is where the two nuts meet together. And this isn't going to be an exact measurement. It's going to move around a little bit when we actually go to measure this out to make our final cut. But that right there is telling me that we're going to need a 2-foot bar on this side. It's probably going to be a little bit less than that when we actually build it. But just so we know how much material that we're going to need, we're going to go 2 foot here, 2 foot there, total of 4 foot to make this happen. So we're back in the shop this Saturday morning, trying to proceed a little bit further with this thing because this weekend I want to get this completely done. I want to get it painted and I want to get it back in the truck. Now I do want to mention that I had some devastating news that a dear friend by the name of Jim Fraley passed away. To his friends and family, our condolences and prayers are with you guys. Jim Fraley was a banjo absolute powerhouse of a player here in North Carolina. Well respected. Everybody knew him greatly. And he was definitely a player that you would model yourself after. World class, I mean, just absolutely phenomenal player. And matters of fact, on the banjo video I did on my 28 Master Tone, Mr. Fraley was the one that actually set that banjo up to really get it back playable again. It was so out of whack, and then it was in good condition, but it wasn't playable. Everything was just so far out of adjustment. And Jim was the one that took care of that for me and got it to where I could really enjoy it. And I'll never forget that. And the time spent and the laughs shared, the music played. It was a privilege to be able to even stand next to him to play music as many times as I was able to. And he is going to be greatly missed. And to the family, we're thinking of you, and our hearts are with you. Now, moving back to this truck project, now's the time where we have a lot of little goodies starting to roll through the door, things that are really starting to make the wife question life. See, now the first box, now, I'm not going to lie to you, all this stuff came off of the old Amazon. And we have, fuel pressure regulator. Now, I'm not going to lie, all this stuff that I got here was made in China, which pretty much everything is. What choices do you have? But dang, look at the packaging on this thing. This is the PQY Performance fuel pressure regulator. This vacuum line here can be used for vacuum or boost. Of course, we're going to have that on the boost side of it, but your fuel line comes in here, fuel line comes out here, and I believe this is the return to tank, or this is the return to tank. We'll have to do some reading up on that to figure that out. But I got to be honest with you, the quality of it seems really nice. Comes with a mount already. We'll probably drill holes in the firewall and use those nut inserts to actually secure that. So that'll be nice. And yeah, I know the truck's going to be black and blue and all this other stuff, but I thought maybe the red accents under the hood would look kind of cool. I'm not sure what, oh, that's the gauge. It'll give you a gauge, so that's going to go here. So not bad. I want to say that this was only like 30 something dollars. But if you're like me, you're looking for, reviews and the amount of reviews and, the quality of the reviews. And it seemed like that this was all right. So unless you guys have heard otherwise, that's what we're going to roll with when we get to that level. The next one, look at the box. Fancy. This is, my word, the box is probably nicer than the part. Operations instructions, right. This is, okay, so this is our electronic line lock for when we go to do a burnout. Now this is also the PQY brand, same as this fuel pressure regulator, so I sure hope it's good or I'm going to have a bunch of junk on this truck. Of course, good weight. Mount, kind of odd. You got 2 mounting points on that side and 1 on that side. I guess you wouldn't need any more than that, but yeah, line in and then your lines out. Looks like it gives you a few different options on there. Of course, 12 volt. Also gives you a trigger switch. Look at this case. I got expensive microphones that don't come in cases this nice. And they give you a little trigger switch, which I'm not going to lie. Look at there. They give you screws, Teflon tape, fuse with a light so you know when it's engaged, or you know if your fuse is blown. One of the two. We'll have to read up on that. You could wire it any way, actually. But they give you this little trigger switch. And yeah, it would work, but the mount base of it is kind of odd. You don't actually have a way to mount it. You have to strap it to something. That's the way that thing's set up. You actually have to strap it around something. So I don't like that. We're probably going to not use this and go for some sort of a push button that mounts to the steering wheel. But we'll throw that back in the stuff that we won't throw away but will never use. But seems like pretty decent quality. Case kind of blows me away. So we're going to put all that stuff on the back burner, but when you see these deals pop up, not a bad idea to stockpile those because you're going to need them eventually. Now getting back to our traction bar setup. This is what we built, other than the little 2 tabs on the bottom of the spring plate. You can see what we got going on here. This is where it pivots. Of course, I grabbed some more washers, and that's where our rod's going to be. And then, of course, I used a long, I'm going to cut some of this bolt head off of it because we don't need that much thread sticking out. But you can see I went with a long shoulder bolt because I wanted this shoulder to make full contact with the spring. I didn't want to have threads or anything in there. I wanted a solid bolt on the spring. But we're just going to smooth out these welds. Good welds, but we just want to clean them up because we're going to paint all this. And we're going to center this one up and kind of hang it back on the other side and go from there and get our rod measurements. And when I'm talking about rods, I got a very expensive carbon alloy that's wrapped in carbon fiber, custom painted. No, didn't get any of that. We have a regular standard black iron pipe. Now I measured 2 foot, just kind of a preliminary mock-up that we was going to need on each side. So we grabbed a 48-inch pipe for about 10 bucks, and we're just going to split this thing right in half, and we'll take our heim joints and we'll weld a nut on the end of it, clean it all up. That's what we're going to use. And that way when we twist it this way, it loosens it up, twist it that way, it tightens it up. And we can set our adjustments from there. So let's get under there and get some measurements. Now in my experience doing a lot of welding, on these pipes, before you weld your nut to that, you want to clean all the coating off. And this is just common practice. And we did take our tip here to a 45-degree bevel, just to make sure we get that penetration that we need getting around there. So all we've done so far is split that 4-foot pipe in half. We didn't cut the other side to full measurement yet. We're going to go ahead and zip this side together just with some spot tacks. And then that's going to make it easier so we can hang on one side and get kind of more accurate on the other side. If that makes any sense. So we're just going to level this thing up as best as we can, center it up, which if you're wondering, I've mentioned a couple times, this is a 5/8 heim joint and this is a 3/4 inch pipe. And that seemed to work great. Anything bigger than that would have been too big. Anything smaller than that would have been too small. So this is perfect. Let's go ahead and give this a little bit of a zip just to hold her in place. Perfect. Let's give her a little zap here. So just with a little simple tacks on there, now we have an adjustable end. It's like a tie rod. All right, now we're actually going to get under there and hang this. All right, so I think we are about there on this side. Again, these aren't fully welded, they're just tacked. And basically what I did is I split the difference on the heim joint threads. That way I had max adjustability out and in. So let's go ahead and just set this thing in there with a couple bolts and see how it turned out. Now, one thing I do want to mention, and I know you guys have been in this situation before, where you might have permanently made something on the wrong side. I did that just recently on this shock perch. But the left-handed heim joints are silver, and the right-handed ones are gold. Just make sure that you get them the right way and you don't accidentally weld two left-handed ones on one side and two right-handed ones on the other side. Looks like we actually have a traction bar. Now you can see that this is, in that position, is approximately about a little less than, probably about 3/8 inch off of the spring. So what we'll do, we're going to go ahead and twist that in. You see how it's going to cantilever right on down so she touches. And she's touching there with a little bit of pressure, which so I'm not sure, and we probably won't know until we actually put it on a track. But I don't know how much tension you're supposed to put on that. You can put quite a bit. She's solid in there, so. And we got full contact across the spring. And then from there, you can just lock in your heims. I believe that's exactly what we're looking for. I'm confident in that. I like what I see. So we're going to go ahead and blast that back off here and get those things fully welded and move on to the other side. All right, guys. So we have this wrapped up. Now, this came out fantastic. I couldn't be happier. Now, don't overthink this. If you want to build something like this yourself, you can do it. It doesn't have to be an S-10. This can work on pretty much any leaf spring setup. And look, let me get you in here a little closer. These brackets here should be pretty self-explanatory. There's not a whole lot happening down there. It's just some drop-down brackets welded to the spring plate with a hole drilled through the middle of it. Not a big deal. This side over here, I know you may look at that and seem like it's a little bit more complicated. But guys, just think about this for a second. It's just a matter of fixed points. Here is our fixed point. If you pull a measurement from the center of this fixed point down to where you want your arm to rest on your spring, there's your distance. And then from there, you want to have enough articulation, but enough clearance from here. It may vary on your build if it's not an S-10. This one ain't but just probably about 2.5 inches. And then you're going to duplicate that plate to this one and to the third one, to the fourth one to complete 2 sets of them, obviously. But it's really, really simple. Add gussets wherever you can just to give it some strength, but make sure it's out of the way and clearanced. But bottom line, it's got one job to do. And is this going to do it? I think so. I think it came out great. And you can see we have full adjustability. See it raising down or lowering down, raising up. It's exactly what we're looking for. So, and I know inflation, things have come up a little bit, but my total cost in all of this, minus my time and labor, probably around $80. So not very much money. So, you know, it's going to serve the purpose. It's going to do the thing. It's going to look great. What we're going to do right now is get all this stuff apart, and we're going to go ahead and mount it to that rear end. And we're going to clean that rear end, and we're going to paint all of this gloss black and then get it back installed because it's going to look great against this blue. Well, we are done with the assembly of this rear end finally. Now, I just pushed it outside. I soaked the whole thing down in Dawn dish soap and washed it, scrubbed it real good, and we're going to let this thing dry overnight. It's going to take it a little while to completely drip dry. We're going to turn the heat up in here, get it real hot to really help just aid in that a little bit. But tomorrow, we're going to get into painting it and then getting it slid up under there and seeing what our final result looks like. Rear end is clean. degreased, it's wiped down with Prep-All, and it is ready to paint. We're going to lay the primer to it. Then we're going to hit it with that Prism Black, which is the same type of paint we use on the frame. Of course, it's 3-to-1 mix. And if you're curious about any of that kind of paint, we'll go back and watch the last video. It'll cover all of that. But we're masked up. We're ready to roll. So we're going to do what we do and get to spraying. Well, that time has come. She's primered and painted. Looks fantastic. Looks like you just dipped this thing into a paint tub. Let me get you in for a closer look. You can see that prism just really lays down the shine. And you know, does it really take that much more effort to make this thing look great? I mean, end of the day, let's say that the truck as a whole turns out to be a piece of crap. Well, at least it'll be a shiny piece of crap. Nobody will be able to say that it doesn't look good. But we have this thing finished. We're just going to let it hang on the great apple picker. And I got the heat turned on high. And we're just going to let this thing bake. But hopefully, within the next day or two, we'll be able to get it installed into this truck. And that'll be that. That'll be that. Then we're going to get onto this transmission. So we have wrapped up this project. We are gun, stock, barrel complete with it. We don't have any more to do to it other than adjust it at the racetrack. But was all this work worth it? You be the judge. Guys, I couldn't be more thrilled with the way this turned out. I'll get you in here a little closer. You see our pivoting brackets, our adjustment rod, all the way down with the new hardware. Everything is adjusting smoothly. But yeah, we did get this thing, this rear end back into this truck. Everything lined up perfect right where it was supposed to. And honestly, can you tell me the difference between that and the real expensive store-bought models? I'm having a hard time seeing it. But it all just came out exactly as planned. And you know, anybody can do this. It just takes the time. Look at our spring or our shock purchase, how nice those things turned out. So, you know, we're just going to lock this thing down here. Everything is fully tightened and secured. We went over and checked them twice. And, you know, obviously we still have a lot of plumbing and stuff to do on those air shocks, but we're going to wait to do all that until we get the cab and the bed, everything on it. So let's talk about the next steps for this truck. Where do we go from here? Well, let's see, what have we got accomplished? If you've been following along from the very beginning of the build, we got this thing tore apart. We did all the chassis modifications that we need to, the frame modifications, got the frame painted. Engine was already built. We did some modifications for you guys on the engine, and we'll get more into that too, because there's some other performance parts we're going to be hanging on that engine before it's over with. But we got engine completed. We have the frame completed and painted. We got the rear end completed, painted, and installed. So we're getting some really big ticket items knocked out. What's our next step? Right here. TH350. And there is so many cool little tricks and tips that I'm going to go over with you guys as we rebuild this thing, including all new clutch packs. We're going to have a hardened sprag we're going to put in there. We're going to do some modifications on some of the little doodabs and thingamajiggers and spring-loaded this and that. That's going to really make this thing kick second gear real hard. And it's just going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to tear into it, and we're going to learn this thing together. I'm excited to do this. And from there, we're going to bolt this thing to that engine, slap that whole bad boy in that truck. Then we are moving on to this cab. Now, this is where some of the body work's going to start to come in, because this one was a 5-speed and we're automatic now. So we got to patch that transmission tunnel, and we're going to body in all this firewall. Obviously, we deleted the heater box and all the other stuff that goes along with that. We are going to keep windshield wipers, but a couple of these little holes, we're going to plug those up. Going to need this hole for our brake master cylinder. This truck was a 5-speed, so we're going to go ahead and delete on this clutch master cylinder hole, and the original junction box, we are going to delete on that. Then we're going to just smooth all this out and just make this thing look nice. And without giving away any secrets on the grand scheme of the paint job, we are going to paint this firewall black, just like the rear end, as well as underneath the cab. And from there, we're going to install it on this truck, and then we're going to go through the body process from there. And the bed's going to be last, because that's going to take up a lot of space. And that bed over there, It's not bad, but there's a lot of dings and dimples in it, and there's going to be a lot of things we got to work out, but we're going to do that together, and this is going to be a slick ride, and I can't wait to fire this thing for the first time. So if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do. It helps us out, shows us that you're entertained and you're interested in the things that we're doing. We hope you learned something, and by all means, I leave comments on. If you see something that I'm doing wrong, hey, this is a how to learn. Please comment in the comment section, and we can all better ourselves and our skill levels. And I want to thank every one of you for watching, and we'll see you next time.